We are overtime with RC Fischer. We talked a bunch on the Mind of Mansion show about deep players, late round quarterbacks. Went on for 3.5 hours. Go to the live feed section of the Player Profiler channel on YouTube to just get the most actionable information for your fantasy draft you're going to get all year. We didn't even get through all the questions I wanted to ask. We talked a little bit about how precarious the situation is for Jordan Love and how Jordan Love is a likely bust where Kenny Pickett is a likely hit, and yet Jordan Love's ADP is earlier for an unknown reason. We see a bunch of ADPs, a bunch of draft positions in fantasy football that actually don't make any logical sense. Like, why? Like, why would you ever think about drafting Alexander Madison over Rashad White? Like, that's one of the dumbest things you could do, right? Just like in a super flex or 2 QB league, especially a dynasty league, Jordan Love over Kenny Pickett makes no sense. A couple of these quarterbacks that are currently backups or number threes are going to end up starting games this year and have value in Superflex and 2 QB leagues. Let's call them this year's Davis Mills. Okay. Who do you see as being the potential heir to the Davis Mills throne in fantasy?
The illustrious throne to be gotten.
Well, I say Davis Mills because you could have flipped him for a valuable rookie pick after his rookie year.
Yeah, and he had a good rookie year.
Yeah.
And he wasn't the starter from the jump, but he got thrown in and really played well. Of the rookies out there, I mean, maybe unfair, but Clayton Tune may start right off the bat because he has to, because Kyler Murray's isn't going to be back, and they decide to wing it with Clayton Tune. So there's him. But talking about Jordan Love,
what do you think about Clayton Tune in a vacuum? Like, Clayton Tune, is he a good prospect, underrated prospect like Davis Mills was, or is he just the guy that's there and that's the best situation to be in because we know that Murray can't start the season?
He's the guy that's there. He's not horrible, and he can actually move around pretty well, and he's got some size to him. He may give you a game or two that is maybe fantasy worthy. I think
he'll struggle.
He'll struggle as a passer.
Just so we can be clear here, 4,000 passing yards with 40 TDs and 10 interceptions. That's a good touchdown interception ratio. I'm looking for better than 3-1. He gives us that. Close to a 70% completion percentage at Houston. He had Tank Dell at wide receiver. But then he also, as you mentioned, put up 500-plus rushing yards. He runs a 4.64. That's 88th percentile among quarterbacks.
Yeah, so Tune, especially for fantasy, makes sense, and I don't think Kyler's going to be back for week 1. So, and they may have more vested in going with Tune and not even trying to pretend with Colt McCoy. So I could see it being Tune. I thought Sean Clifford would be a legit answer because I think Jordan Love's going down the tubes. But I really do think that Alex Magoo, the guy that they signed from the USFL, the MVP from the USFL, is the best quarterback that they have on their roster. They signed him and put him at the back end of the depth chart. They already moved him just ahead of they just did move him ahead of Sean Clifford. So Danny Etling, I think, is number 2, and it's only going to matter of time before he leapfrogs him. Magoo's got talent, and he's got some experience. He's got some of that rookie washed off of him from his NFL time, but and he was pretty decent in preseasons with Seattle. He was, I think, a 6th-round pick or 7th-round pick for Seattle. But he was the best quarterback in the USFL. Obviously, took him to a championship, won an MVP. He's pretty good in that Taylor Heineke kind of, like, he's not going to
runs a 4.67. He can move around similarly.
Yeah.
comes from a small school, was not a prolific passer, but that's because he was at Florida International for so many years. But in his final year, 8 yards per attempt, that was good, 65% completion percentage. So in his final year at age 21 at Florida International, he did put up quality. I mean, it's hard for me to say this with a straight face, that he was a quality quarterback. I mean, only 17 touchdowns, but I mean, in his sophomore year at Florida International, in only 12 games, he had 2,700 yards, 21 touchdowns, only 8 interceptions that year. So he's shown at an earlier age that he could be productive. Brock Purdy did something similar, where Brock Purdy's best year was in his final year, right? So
Yep.
we've seen that from quarterbacks before, where something happens with their team and their team situation, the offensive coordinator, whatever it is, and you actually have to go back to their sophomore year to find their best season. So, and his name's Magoo,
I know.
right? His name's not Bijan, right? Bijan, name and lights. Oh, would you please pass the Bijan, right? No, Magoo. His name's Magoo. So I love him for that reason. That means when I see that, I see value.
Yeah, I believe he will be the starter in Green Bay by midseason. And I would have said Sean Clifford until they signed Magoo.
But Sean Clifford's also not bad. It could
No,
be
no, I
true.
like Sean Clifford
I like Sean Clifford too. That's
in
the
that
thing.
back
I
at the
thought you were going to
draft
say Sean
kind of.
Clifford.
I
I
would
thought
have
you
if it was before they signed Magoo.
This is crazy. It's crazy in a good way, man. So according to Matt Kelly and R.C. Fischer, by week 12, Jordan Love may have fallen to number 3 on the Green Bay depth chart behind Sean Clifford and a guy named Magoo. Clifford and Magoo.
I'll see your week 12 and raise you to week 8.
Let's do
That's the
that again.
name. I think that's the name of the show. A guy named Magoo.
One more name for you. He's a rookie. I've drafted him in a handful of super flex leagues. What do you think about Aiden O'Connell? All he has to beat out at this point is, whoever's behind Jimmy Garoppolo at the time, when right now it happens to be Brian Hoyer. So he has to beat out Brian Hoyer and then wait for one of the quarterbacks with the worst pocket awareness we've ever seen to, get blindsided and break ribs and be knocked out for a few games. Aiden O'Connell, right? That's a good candidate? He was pretty good at Purdue.
He'll definitely be the guy behind Jimmy G, but scouting O'Connell specifically, but then getting to see him while scouting Charlie Jones, while scouting the tight end Durham. He's a bit of a mess. He has some moments. He's a gamer. He's a scrapper. All the cliches you want, but
They drafted him in the 4th round, man.
he's super skinny, and he um, telegraphs his throws. He has some moments. He has some moments, but you go look at his. I'm not looking at it, but he has some righteous turnover numbers, and the real turnover numbers don't portray how many near miss turnovers he has. He has some killer games, and then he had some just disasters.
What
Uh,
happened? I mean, talk about a guy that had a better year the previous year. 3,700 yards. We're talking about 28 TDs, 11 interceptions, 8.4 yards per attempt, 72% completion percentage. The guy was great as a junior. And then in his senior year, his yards per attempt fell under 7. His completion percentage fell under 65, and he had 13 interceptions and only 22 touchdowns, which is embarrassing. How did he get drafted in the 4th round?
and he had 2 NFL options to throw to that bailed him out quite a bit in Jones and Durham. So I mean, he's not nothing, but I think Clayton Tune's got a little more zip to his game all the way around. Like, you're not going to get any sneaky rushing yards out of Aiden. If all else fails, Sean Clifford and Clayton Tune and Magoo can run. Will get you maybe 15, 20, or maybe they'll run for that 5-yard touchdown. You're not getting that at Aiden O'Connell. They'll break him in half.
Tune was the prolific passer. Tune has the athleticism. The idea that the Raiders would draft O'Connell over Tune appears absurd and just goes to show why they're the Raiders.
Yeah,
But they're
the
still
Raiders
the
are
Raiders.
absurd. Josh McDaniels is absurd. So they all deserve each other.
They're one of the worst run franchises, and we led off with the best option of all these fringy quarterbacks and superflex. And in 2QB, the guy that you want, the guy that's available in the final round, the guy that's out there on your waiver wire, it's absolutely got to be Clayton Tune.
I'm going to give you one more for the answer to this question because I'm a giver. I'm going to give you my secret love third string quarterback.
Please.
That is Jalen Hurts-like in potential. As a runner, he's a better runner. As a passer, he's not as good a passer, but he's not horrible. You know who I'm going to say? Not many people are. I didn't even catch on to this guy till late in the process. I'd kind of look past him. But when you get a chance, anybody within the sound of my voice, go check out the highlight package for Adrian Martinez from Kansas State. And tell me if you don't see some Jalen Hurts. And he's on a depth chart behind Jared Goff, but with Hendon Hooker, who's not going to play. So right now, Adrian Martinez is taking a ton of snaps in practice. They didn't sign Teddy Bridgewater yet, or maybe are never going to. But when you see the highlight package you can get them on YouTube pretty easily. You watch Adrian Martinez run the ball, you're like, holy hell, why isn't somebody trying to do something with this guy as a quarterback?
Well, the year before, he had 9.4 yards per attempt. And then as a true freshman, he had 2,600 yards as a freshman at Nebraska.
He's like the number one power running back in this draft, but he's a quarterback. An undrafted free agent quarterback that nobody even cares exists.
Oh, he is interesting.
Like, worst case scenario, they could make him a running back.
He is interesting. He could be the next Taysom Hill. He could be a guy that fantasy gamers are getting real value from out of the quarterback position, even though he is a run-first quarterback, and there aren't very many of them in the league. But if it comes to it and Goff is out, right, it lands on his shoulder the wrong way, and then suddenly it's the Adrian Martinez era in Detroit.
I'm sure they will never let that happen. I'm sure they will actively make sure that does not happen. But right now, he's close. He's the next in line.